Hello, everybody, and welcome to the Gridiron Junkies podcast. As always, I'm your host, Rick Horn. If you're already part of the community, welcome back. Glad to have you. If you are new and you do like this video, please give it a thumbs up. Just smash that subscribe button, hit the bell, get the notifications, the whole 9 yards. We're really trying to grow this community into something awesome. And like I say in every video, if you're a fan of football, you've come to the right place. We have all of the trash talk, all of the banter. It's all right here. All of the action, everything. I'm going to have more content on the NFL. The XFL as more developments happen there. And it was pretty interesting. I did have a viewer recently comment and ask, why do I not have any content on the CFL? Because that's football too, right? That is very true. To answer your question, I only recently started dipping my toe into watching the CFL a little bit last year. So I want to make sure that I'm more well informed before I put out any more content. But great question. I do like what I saw from the CFL. We'll just have to see. I'm going to watch it a little bit more, before I make an executive decision, but definitely keep your eye out for that. I do want to talk today about the NFC South. And a couple weeks ago, I put out a video for my way too early predictions on the NFC North. And so today we're going south, right? And I don't have any jerseys, for any teams in the NFC South because I'm not necessarily a fan. It's not that I dislike the teams, but I don't call myself a fan of any of those teams. So to kind of get in the spirit of the South, I've got my number 9 Water Boy jersey here. Bobby Boucher of the SCLSU Mud Dogs. Got the Bourbon Bowl patch, so I figured to just kind of get into the spirit of going down south there. But one thing that I do want to say is, I don't have enough time today, unfortunately, to go as in depth as I did in my NFC North video. But I'm still going to try to get to the meat and potatoes of everything, kind of break all of these teams down, to come up, with an educated opinion as to why I think that they're going to finish where they are. I mean, we're still only a little over halfway through June, so again, these are way too early predictions that I'm sure I'm not going to be the most accurate on, but it's still fun to talk about football. But with that said, let's dive right into it. And I do just want to start out by saying that the NFC South, it's a pickle to try to figure out. It's very tough to, try to predict this division. It's a very, very high scoring division. And none of the teams in this division are terrible at all. I mean, they're good teams, but somebody has to finish first and somebody has to finish last. So let's dive right into it. Number 4 for me are the Atlanta Falcons. And not just in the NFC South, but in the NFL in general. This is by far one of the more frustrating teams to try to predict. I kind of liken them to the Los Angeles Chargers in that they end up losing games to teams that they're supposed to, beat, but then end up going to San Francisco, and then beating the 49ers, So, again, a very frustrating team to figure out. But, let's take a look at some of the people that they lost. So Vic Beasley, he ended up leaving. I know he kind of underperformed there, but an argument could be made for him, that he was kind of a one-year wonder. I mean, back in 2016, he led the league in sacks with 15 and a half sacks. But then right after that, the next 2 seasons, he was only able to get 10 sacks over those next 2 seasons. But did start to rebound a bit in 2019 with 8 sacks. So, you never know. I mean, maybe a change of scenery will do some good for Vic Beasley. They also lost Austin Hooper, who was an absolute monster of a tight end last year. He ended up signing with Cleveland to just a mega deal. Last year he finished the season with 75 catches for 787 yards and 6 touchdowns. And that's despite missing 3 games with an MCL sprain. So they're definitely going to be feeling the effects of losing him. I think he's by far their biggest loss this offseason. And they also lost Devontae Freeman, who's kind of been hit or miss, with health concerns and everything, but they did try to bring in some people, to kind of fill those gaps. They brought in Todd Gurley, who another player with a myriad of health concerns, particularly with his knees, and I didn't like the move at first until I looked at the deal. They didn't sign him to anything groundbreaking. They signed him to a 1-year deal, $5.5 million deal with a $2 million signing bonus, along with $500,000 in incentives if he has 13 touchdowns or 1,000 rushing yards. So they're basically asking him to, in order for him to get that bonus, they're wanting him to match his production that he had in 2017, which, is obviously well within his wheelbook when he's healthy. I mean, when healthy, a completely clean slate of health. Todd Gurley is one of the best running backs in the NFL, but he's had some health concerns for a while now. So hopefully he can stay healthy. I mean, this is kind of a homecoming for Todd Gurley. He played for Georgia. So in a way, this is kind of a homecoming for him. I know he had to kind of be excited about that. They also signed Hayden Hurst from tight end from the Baltimore Ravens. And Matt Ryan's actually been working out quite a bit with Hayden Hurst recently and had just a ton of praise, for Hayden Hurst in terms of his work ethic and athleticism. Just that he couldn't believe how fast Hayden Hurst was, for a guy his size. So, some chemistry already starting to build there, which I think, is obviously going to be a good thing since they're losing Austin Hooper. And two, they had the Atlanta Falcons defense has been relatively lackluster over the past few years, but to their credit, this is not a division, to have a great defense in, because it's it's a really high scoring division. You know what I'm saying? So, and even with that, they had quite a few injuries on their already lackluster defense. I mean, you look at Desmond Trufant, he started to play well. I mean, he had a career high 4 interceptions, despite only playing 9 games, but not a whole lot of bright spots on the Atlanta defense there. And I take a look at their season from last year. They finished 7-9 with the 7th toughest schedule. And this year, it gets a little bit tougher for them. They're tied for 5th with the Bills, the Lions, and the Cardinals. I'm going to give them another finish of 7-9. I mean, I know this is one of those teams that just has an immense range of outcomes. I'm happy to be wrong about this one. I'm happy to be very wrong about this one because I like the Atlanta Falcons, but tough team to predict. Like I said, wide range of outcomes, but 7-9 is where I sit with the Atlanta Falcons. Coming in at number 3 for me are the Carolina Panthers, who will be led out by new head coach Matt Rule, who is most recently the head coach at Baylor. And he had a great year last year. He was named the Big 12 Coach of the Year and ended up going to the Big 12 Championship, ended up losing in overtime to Oklahoma. So this is another experiment that the NFL is doing with college head coaches. I mean, we saw Cliff Kingsbury last year. But this is a team that I see very much in rebuilding mode. I think it's going to be another year or two, provided that they keep most of the same people and nobody freaks out and fires Matt Rule. I think give it another year or two, and I think that this team could very well make a lot of noise, but I do see them in rebuilding mode right now. They did add, probably their most notable addition was Teddy Bridgewater, who was the backup quarterback of the New Orleans Saints last year. Now, Teddy Bridgewater did win 5 straight games for the Saints while Drew Brees was injured. But it is important to note the fact that the Saints had an absolutely cartoonishly stacked roster, and most of those wins were against bad teams. Teddy Bridgewater does do a lot of dinking and dunking, but I think of the quarterbacks that that play that way, he's one of the better quarterbacks to do it. And if nothing else, I think he's a very solid game manager. They also added Robbie Anderson, wide receiver from the New York Jets last year. It's pretty cool. Robbie Anderson will be reuniting with Matt Rule because that was his head coach back in Temple when he was playing college ball. And I mean, he's going from being the number 1 receiving option there in New York to the number 3 and arguably number 4 target there in Carolina, if you count Christian McCaffrey. So it's kind of a shame, but I mean, if nothing else, he does add speed. He runs a 4.36 40, but he's going to end up fighting Curtis Samuel for that deep threat role. We'll just have to see what happens there. I did want to also talk about a couple of players, who may not have immediate impact, but rather it's kind of a cool story. They also added PJ Walker, a quarterback from the XFL Houston Roughnecks, from a few months ago, and Kenny Robinson, a safety from the XFL St. Louis Battlehawks. Both of these guys were absolute stars in the XFL. PJ Walker was easily the XFL's most standout player. I mean, he led the league. He led the XFL in passing yards and passing touchdowns. He completed 65% of his passes. So I dare say, if things start going south for Teddy Bridgewater for too terribly long, it wouldn't surprise me if they didn't try to see what they had. I think this is kind of a dice roll for them to sign PJ Walker to begin with. But I don't think that he's a terrible backup. I mean, I think that, he offers some things that Teddy Bridgewater doesn't. He's obviously not afraid, to go deep, and he is kind of a mobile quarterback. So if things start to go south for Teddy Bridgewater, I could very easily see PJ Walker stepping in and taking the keys there. But there's also a lot to be said about Kenny Robinson. I mean, he has just a really, really cool story. I mean, in college, he was one of the best safeties in college. Back in 2017 to 2018, he allowed less than 45% of the passes thrown into his coverage to be completed. And, the 2 years he played in college, he had 7 interceptions. He was released from West Virginia for some academic misconduct after his sophomore year. So that was kind of rough for him. But, then he enters the XFL on my St. Louis Battlehawks and was just an absolute beast. I mean, of the 8 passes that were thrown his way, he intercepted 2 of them, and it was just super disruptive. I mean, he was very good at pressuring the quarterback as a safety. Just a very disruptive player and a huge personality. He was a lot of fun to watch in the XFL. But he's going to be one of many very, very young starters on this Carolina Panthers. Rookie starters, if you will. And you look at the Panthers defense from last year, they had a pretty terrible defense. I mean, they were 29th against the run, a little above average against the pass, 13th against the pass, but 23rd overall. So they did not have a strong defense whatsoever, but they definitely tried to correct that in the draft. Correct me if I'm wrong, but I want to say the Carolina Panthers, I don't even know if they drafted any offensive players in the draft this year. I think it was all defensive players. If not, they were heavily on the defensive side of the ball as far as the draft is concerned. So, when you have a mostly rookie defense, that kind of worries me, especially in a division like this when you have, 6 games, Tom Brady, Drew Brees, Matt Ryan. That's kind of scary for me. But this is another one of those teams that could have a pretty wide range of outcomes. I look at their last year's record. They finished 5-11 with the 16th toughest schedule this year. They tie for the 18th toughest schedule with the Kansas City Chiefs. I'm going to give them a record of 8-8. This is another team super tough to predict. I still think they're in rebuild mode. And the youngest defense in the league with a very high scoring division, that kind of scares me. So I think really you can make an argument for them to be the, finishing 4th as well, but that's kind of where I have them. I think that they have enough firepower and, Christian McCaffrey, the best running back in the league by far. You definitely have a shot with him. So 8-8 is where I stand with the Carolina Panthers. Coming in at number 2 for me this year are the Tampa Bay Buccaneers. And maybe we should call them the Tampa Bay Buccaneers, right? I mean, because it's obviously no secret here. This is the team that is all the rage right now in the NFL, by adding Tom Brady to their roster and obviously Rob Gronkowski as well. This is a team I can very well see making the playoffs and really giving the New Orleans Saints, a very tough fight, for that division title. And this is by far the best weapons that Tom Brady has had in his career. I know a lot of people are going to make arguments about Randy. Well, what about Randy Moss? Randy Moss was a beast, but he was only 1 wide receiver. He was just so good that he basically counted for 4 wide receivers. But they have obviously Mike Evans there, who has been a fantastic number 1 wide receiver in that offense. But that number 2, Chris Godwin, he had a phenomenal year last year as well. So great wide receiver weapons. I'm not crazy about the Rob Gronkowski move, if I'm being honest. I mean, it makes for a great storyline, but I think other than, a few splash plays here and there, I mean, he'll probably have 1 or 2 pretty decent games, but other than that, I think he'll essentially be a non-factor. I think he does help the team overall because I think that he's still enough of a threat, to take some defensive looks away, to take some pressure away from other players, particularly in those 2 wide receivers. But other than that, I think he's going to be a non-factor. I mean, they already have O.J. Howard and Cameron Brate, and historically, Bruce Arians has just never been big on using his tight ends. Now, with that being said, Tom Brady obviously has a lot of say-so, just his power in the league, being the GOAT, and so I'm sure Bruce Arians will definitely respect his opinions. And I know that there's been things that have come out that said, we're still going to run our offense, with, some influence by some of the things that Tom Brady brings to the table as well. I'm also not crazy about the running back situation. I mean, it's going to be running back by committee, which I know that Tom Brady is very well used to. He's basically played with a running back by committee most of his career there in New England, but he'll get them where he needs them, right? I mean, they don't have a 100-yard rusher. I mean, I know Ronald Jones, he could probably get you 100 yards every, few games or so, but he's not, their running back group is not the type that, they're going to try to rely on, nor should they on a week-to-week basis. And they very well could have drafted a running back this year if they wanted to, but they had to spend that draft capital on a tackle, because let's face it, Tom Brady is not going to be winning any 40-yard dashes anytime soon. Same with him and Phillip Rivers, those type of guys. But I take a look at their last season's record. They finished 7-9 with the 12th toughest schedule, and that's with Jameis Winston throwing for 30 interceptions. So, all things considered, not too bad, I guess. This year, it gets a little bit easier for them. They have a strength of schedule at 16th, tied with the Indianapolis Colts. And so, I look at all these things. I'm going to say that they go 7-9, or excuse me, not 7-9, 9-7. I think that they very well could exceed that. The only thing that I'm worried about with this team is that pass defense is still putrid. I mean, when it comes to run defense, they look like an absolute stone wall, but they just fall apart against the passing game. So we'll just have to see what happens. I think that if they're able to, improve that defense, which I don't see much more they can do at this point, from a secondary standpoint, then, they'll get better. But 9-7 is where I see them going. And topping off the list for me at number 1 are the New Orleans Saints. They are my favorite to win the NFC South once again. And really, there's not a lot to talk about here. I mean, they made an already cartoonishly stacked roster even more stacked. They went out and they signed safety Malcolm Jenkins. They also added wide receiver Emmanuel Sanders, who I think is going to be a great number 2 wide receiver opposite of Michael Thomas. And I know he's kind of inching into that football old territory, but I don't think that matters too much. He's still a solid wide receiver. And honestly, I mean, they have a lot of depth at a lot of positions. I mean, Teddy Bridgewater played well enough last year with that stacked roster while Drew Brees was injured. And now they have Jameis Winston. So if Drew Brees goes down, I mean, at the very least, they have a guy with starting experience very, very recently. And I mean, Jameis Winston can win you some games. There's going to be some touchdowns thrown. Touchdowns are going to be made with Jameis Winston, whether that's to the Saints or to whoever they're playing. I'm sure there's even going to be a few fans catching a few touchdowns for anytime Jameis Winston takes the field. I kid, obviously, sort of, but that is to say they have depth. They also still have Taysom Hill there, so if Drew Brees gets hurt, Jameis Winston isn't working out. Taysom Hill, the Swiss Army knife, is still there, and he was actually throwing a little bit better than Drew Brees in that very last game that they played. I mean, Taysom Hill, that guy's insane. I mean, he can throw the ball. Obviously, not as good as Drew Brees, but he's a serviceable quarterback. He can block. He can catch. He can catch passes. The guy, I don't know how to stress it enough. He's a Swiss Army knife. And, I mean, they have Latavius Murray. So if Alvin Kamara goes down, which he did for a little bit last year, Latavius Murray is a solid running back and can ball out for them. They still have Jared Cook at the tight end position, who played very well last year. And not to mention that they have a solid defense as well. So this is by and far the most well-rounded team in this division. They went 13-3 last year with the 22nd toughest schedule. And it gets even easier for them this year. They have the 8th easiest schedule in the entire National Football League with the 24th ranked toughest schedule. But with that said, I know they finished 13-3 with a little bit tougher schedule. I've got them going 10-6 this year. And hear me out now. The very first game that they played this season is in Las Vegas. That is going to be and it's a Monday night game. So primetime game at a brand new stadium, new fan base. And I'm sure Vegas is always going to be a tough, regardless of how terrible the Raiders play. I'm sure that Vegas is going to be a very tough place to play, just on tourism alone. So that place is going to be insane. I think, obviously, from a roster standpoint, the Saints are by and far the better team. But I think that environment could be one of those games that, that they should win. But I think that the Raiders could pull one over on them. And I could also see them losing in Denver. November in week 12, just because it's obviously a cold climate in the wintertime, and with natural grass, you have another team like Philly in December, week 14. They just don't seem to play well on natural grass. Drew Brees does it. He's average at best, when playing in colder climates. And then I think the other 3 losses that they have are ones that they split with their division opponents. So there you have it. Those are my way too early predictions on the NFC South. Let me know what you think in the comments. How do you have the NFC South stacking up? Who do you see winning the division this year? Do you see any breakout players, from any particular team, some sleepers, right? Let me know in the comments. Again, if you like this video, give it a thumbs up, smash that subscribe button, hit the bell so you get the notifications. I'm going to have tons more content coming out. Going to continue to go through different divisions in the NFL. As I continue to hear more about the XFL, we'll talk about that as well. So, listen, it's been great talking to you guys. We'll talk to you later.